So offensive skills are going to be moved to weapons? Now this sounds interesting. Hey guys, another Bushido here, hope you guys are doing alright. And recently Capcom had an interview where they talked about offensive skills being linked to weapons to balance the fact that now we have 2 weapons, which is pretty damn cool. So we're going to go over the interview and then talk about what it means for the game, and then lastly having a tier list of skills that might potentially fall into the offensive skills on weapons. So let's get into this. Also shout out to RX Gaming, as this is where I got the information from. They also talked about Elder Dragons and other facts, so if you're interested, check it down in the description below of this video. And also this article is from translation, so bear that in mind. So the interviewer asked, although we carry 2 different weapons, the equipment on our body should only be compatible with one of the weapons, right? Will this affect the usage rate of the other weapon? And then Tokida, the director of Monster Hunter Wilds, says, for this part of the adjustments, this time we adjusted the mechanism to equip attack related skills to weapons. When switching weapons, the skills on the weapons will automatically activate. In addition, the skill combination can be matched through accessory adjustment so that when switching different types of weapons, you can switch to equipment that is compatible with other weapons. So there's 2 things I'm getting from this. Offensive skills will be moved to weapons, in turn meaning a rebalance of the whole system. And 2, accessories will be used to adjust your builds to fit your weapons. Balance always excites me. I thought for the longest time that the system needed rebalancing. Some skills are way too strong, and one that comes to mind is weakness exploit. Then there's other skills that don't get used much at all, like resistances. And some weapons just feel terrible without having certain skills, like gun lance, when it comes to artillery and guard. So I'm very interested in what balance changes they'll be making in conjunction with the plan to move skills to weapons. Coming into Wilds, I was worried that the skill system would be simplified further due to this fact. It was difficult for me to envision how I would be able to build a set for 2 different weapons in the current system. For example, let's take the lance, as I am a lance main. I need guard and ideally guard up. But if my second weapon for some ungodly reason is the longsword, those 2 skills don't really make sense in a weapon, as the longsword can't guard. So the weapons that would benefit most if I take a lance would normally be a gun lance or even a charge blade, which would make build craft feel limited, as there'd be a lot of wasted skills that benefit one weapon but not the other. I firstly assumed that they may simplify skills as a whole to make up for that fact, but instead, they came up with this whole new system which could fix the whole problem entirely, which makes me excited to see what it means in game. Granted, we don't know enough. It's possible that it could still be simplified, but we have to wait and see on that one. One question I have is that there are some skills that aren't traditionally offensive, but they add utility to the offensive capabilities of weapons. How will Capcom handle those? For example, load shells, which increases the cell amount of the gun lance by 1. The skill itself doesn't provide gun lance with more damage, but the fact you have an extra shell means that you have more shells to fire, adding to your overall damage. Would that count as an offensive skill? Probably. So, I think it would be good if you head into Sunbreak to see what offensive skills the game currently has. As usual, I use this game as it's the most recent game released by the Monster Hunter team. We can also have a tier list open, just to kind of help us out visualize the actual skills themselves. And here's a list of all the offensive skills I could find. We'll start here and try to narrow down the ones that are purely offensive and another list of skills that are slightly offensive. But I think we need to clarify what is an offensive skill, and we can do this on our way throughout the list. There are some clear ones such as attack, crit eye and crit boost, but crit sheath and power prolonger indirectly increase the offensive capabilities of the longsword and switch axe respectively. Do those count as offensive skills? They are indirectly offensive skills, so we add that to that tier list. Other skills such as element and status attack are clearly offensive. Maximum Might adds affinity. Even though it has a trigger for you to be at full stamina, its effect itself is offensive. Okay, resentment and peak performance are also offensive. Weakness exploit is a clear one. Agitator, bludgeoner, crit element, I think needs no explanation. But there are some skills such as latent power and horn maestro. Both have offensive power but have effects that are utility. Latent power giving you stamina reduction bonuses, and maestro extending your melee effects with the hunting horn. So maybe for skills like this we need a grey area, so let's add that. From here we got Adrenaline Rush and Affinity Slide. Affinity Slide gives you affinity, which is pretty nice, and Adrenaline Rush gives you damage. So we'll put them both on offensive. Ammo up. Now what does ammo up do? I'm not a bow user, so I'm gonna have to figure that out. But we might as well just put all of the bow ones in, and then we can talk about them. Ammo up increases the clip size of your weapon type, so I'm gonna say it's offensive related. Recoil down decreases the recoil, so I'm gonna say it's also offensive related. Alright, Spare Shot's interesting because it gives you a chance to not expend one of your ammo types, but the skill itself isn't offensive. It just gives you a chance to use something that is offensive more often. So I think that one's going to go into offensive related as well. Next we got normal and rapid up, which increases your normal and rapid damage, which is definitely offensive. Alright, next we got two interesting ones, Focus and Guard. Now Focus doesn't increase your damage, but it does help the Greatsword charge its attacks faster, meaning it does damage more often. But still, I would say this is offensive related. And then you may be wondering, okay Nova, why did you put Guard here? And to be honest, it's just to bring up the point that Guard can also be seen as an offensive skill. Let's take Lance for example. The better the guard, the easier it is to counter, which then just adds to Lance's overall damage. So it can kind of be seen as an offensive skill, but at the same time, maybe even a grey area. Or maybe not on this list at all. I don't know. I'll leave that up to you guys down below. I know there'll be some people who say Nova, that's not offensive at all. So maybe we'll make a new section for guard and just leave it there. I don't want to bore you guys by going through all of them here, so I think we'll just go through some other key ones and then I'll just do the rest in my own time. Next we'll go over the blessings, and each one affects your damage to some extent. With Charmeleus with poison, Gasharla with ice and water damage, and Teostra with fire and blast, so all of those go into offensive. Now one that I did want to talk about is Part Breaker. Even though it doesn't increase the damage you do on a monster, it at least helps you break certain parts faster. So this one could be seen as offensive actually. I also noticed there are some skills that deal with blue and red scrolls like Berserk and Furious, and we're not going to have those scrolls in the next game. I was thinking maybe they'd work with weapon swapping, but weapon swapping can only be done on your mount, so I'm not really sure how many skills would be tied to that, as there is kind of a cooldown between when you're able to actually get on your mount to actually change your weapon. It's not as fast as swapping your scrolls, so these ones, they're not going to be useful here, so I'm going to move them out. Now Mind's Eye is actually a very interesting one, because in Monster Hunter Rise, you actually do more damage when hitting a hard spot on a monster, so this one technically is offensive. Offensive Guard is an interesting one, because the effect itself increasing your damage, but it's triggered by a defensive mechanism. So does that count as offensive? I actually have no idea. You know what? Yeah, I'm going to say it is offensive because it does add to your offense. Now both Blood Awakening and Blood White have to do with regaining health, so I'd say both of these are offensive. Bloodlust changes the effects of Frenzy. In fact, it actually does help you with damage, but at the same time, it does other effects as well, so it's not purely offensive. So for this one, I think it sits in the grey area. And lastly, we have Handicraft, which increases your sharpness, which can be seen as a utility skill, but increasing your sharpness does increase your damage. But honestly, I wouldn't put in offensive. I'm not even sure if it's offensive related. I'm going to put this in the grey area for now, because it indirectly does increase your damage, but it's not really offensive itself. So on a final look, I've actually noticed there are a lot of skills in offensive that actually sits in the grey area, but it's kind of hard to realise unless you look deep into the skills. For example, Teostra and Kashala's Blessing, which both do give you damage in their elements, but at higher tiers it also does other effects, so those effects aren't necessarily offensive. So Capcom have to think about how they're going to balance that if they're going to add those to weapon skills. So I'm going to move some of these into the grey area instead. Alright, this is our list for now, and I'm liking the look of it so far. The problem is, what do we do about the grey area? I'm imagining these are the type of skills that may be rebalanced and revised, as they're not purely offensive. For the longest time in Monster Hunter, stacking offensive skills has always been the meta, even going back to the old gen. In the old gen, there was many skill options, but you could only practically take 4 skills, which led hunters to stack up offensive skills that were more supporting for their weapon and build, and that led to often neglected defensive options. In the 5th gen, we were able to have a crazy amount of skills, which did lead to us bulking up on the strongest of skills. But in turn, once you ran out of offensive skills to add, defensive and utility skills became the next option. In Wilds, it seems like you have no choice, since offensive skills will be restricted to weapons, meaning what you take will matter much more depending on what your weapon needs to work effectively, and not just generic skills like attack and crit, which is pretty exciting. I don't know about you all, but I've often enjoyed the quirky unique skill choices that gives you extra damage in other means, like heroics or bursts, and if we're really limited on the amount of offensive skills we could take, I may take those unique skills over the generic ones more often. And this also means defensive options will have their time to shine, which is awesome. Since defensive and utility skills will be used more on builds, I'm imagining the balance of monsters punishing us will change as well. For example, if you're fighting something that uses fire and don't build correctly, you'll take a lot more damage than you would have in previous games. After all, this game is called Monster Hunter Wilds. Having to prepare for devastating attacks on monsters should be a key element for this game. But there was also that comment about accessories. I imagine this just means talismans. It's also possible that the system around them will slightly differ from what we've had before. So I'm wondering if your talismans will be swapped out as you switch your weapons, giving you a chance to further tie your skills based to your weapons. Damn, so many questions, and we still have to wait 5 months for them to be answered. I really can't wait. Alright guys, that's all I have for you today. Hope you enjoyed the video. Let me know what you think down below about weapon skills, about offensive skills, and these accessory stuff. We're going to be streaming on Fridays. Stay tuned for that. Iceborne should be hyped. Let's go, let's go. I'll let you know when the timing's probably gonna be like 8 p.m. BST. Yeah, it'll be fun to have you guys around and joining some hunts, you know, help me out. But yeah, that's it for me. I'll catch you guys next time. See ya.